Hello, I'm Chuck Martin, and welcome to the Voices of the Internet of Things. With me today is Sargi Mann, Executive Vice President and Head of Digital Strategy and Investments at Havas Media Group. Sargi has been Brand Manager at the Rai Foundation, Senior Analyst at Digitas, and Vice President and Director Search Marketing at Carat USA. At Havas, Sargi focuses on how practitioners can train and think like business analysts to unlock the true value of digital for businesses. Welcome here, Sargi.
Thank you, Chuck. And may I say that it's an absolute pleasure and an honor to be talking to you today.
Well, thank you. It is totally mutual. So tell me exactly what you do at Havas, and then we'll go from there.
So I would like to say that I see myself as a helper and a forever student of the digital marketing landscape at Havas. And by that, I mean, at any given day, I work across various client teams and industry verticals to help put new solutions and new thinking in their digital media investments. So how do we take what the client is looking from a business standpoint to achieve and find the right partners, the right technology, the right data sets, and the right systems that allow them to get the best value out of every digital dollar that they put out in the market.
So how do you do that?
It's a amazing process every day, involved with a lot of learning, and it's a good solution from a standpoint that as we look at any business problem in the current landscape that we're looking at, whether it's the technology, whether it's the devices, whether it's the people and the connections on an ongoing basis, the solution becomes more and more complex every day. And for me, the only way I can do that thinking on behalf of the clients and across the company is by constantly learning and relearning everything on a day-to-day basis. A solution that might be viable today, tomorrow it might be obsolete. So how do we make sure that we create an always on, always fresh pipeline of thinking, of knowledge, of partners and providers to ensure that we are staying ahead of the game versus being reactive?
So you've been in the agency world for a long time, and you've been in the industry for a while. How have you seen this evolve in the industry over the years?
I would say that, over the years, if we look at how the industry as well as people, I always look at things in the context of our environment, of our culture, and of people in general, and how dynamic and rich the lives of a person on every day has become. Like more devices, more connections, more concerns for that matter about privacy and security and data and intelligence. I've seen this entire narrative evolve in real time. I mean, every single day, whether it's about the most advanced technology coming into market, it's still very much grounded on, well, what is that human value? What is that perceivable, tangible business value that it delivers? I've seen people going from, I'll quote one of your pieces in itself, Chuck, where the industry is talking about virtual reality. For years, it was, oh my God, the opportunity on virtual reality. And yet in the last couple of years, we've actually seen that augmented reality has a bigger value proposition versus virtual reality. So no matter how novel an idea is, I've seen that more and more over the years, the reality and the grounding of the business is becoming more and more important to say, yes, it's a great idea. How does it manifest itself? What value does it provide to a consumer? And what value does it provide to the business, and at what cost? And I think that, to me, has become a more of a dynamic equation that I've seen in the industry.
So for businesses today, is there almost too much technology to select from?
I would say yes and no. And I put it in the context of, when we think about the narratives of big data or artificial intelligence and the volume and the velocity aspect of it, to me, I still think that it's not too much information, because the value proposition of either artificial intelligence and all of its sub themes, or for that matter, technology, lies in the ability to produce a deep insight that is built not just on the volume, but how clean and precise that data set is. And it's that piece, I think, is still a viable opportunity that makes sense of all the chatter that's going on. So I don't think it's still too much. It's about the intelligence quotient that's making it more of a, well, is it too much or is it not too much? And people and marketers that are thinking from the lens of, well, it's not going to be about the volume for me, it's going to be about the intelligence and the meaningful insight out of it. They still think that there is a lot of opportunity untapped out there.
So, what does it look like today? Does a brand come to you and say, "We have this problem and we need a solution," and then Havas goes and finds something that may involve some futuristic technology, or do they come and say, "Hey, we'd like to do something in AR"?
It's both ways, Chuck. So the way we operate is when we get a client campaign or a client business brief for the full year ahead, the lens that we go with is, well, as their partners, as their business analyst, what all solutions that we need to put in market and be cognizant of that already exist on clients' business that need to work together for the results we are looking for. So the client doesn't necessarily have to ask us for a novel solution. We put it on ourselves to go with that thinking, saying, well, what has been working and how do we continue to take that momentum forward? What can we improve upon? And then what is the new thinking that we can introduce that allows us to test in a fashion where the results are there, but not at the cost of compromising the performance that we need to deliver upon.
And for agencies today, does this digital knowledge have to reside everywhere, or basically in the brains of people like you?
I think it's everywhere. The more people understand, the more people learn, and the more people are aware of that. I think it makes the adoption and the use that much more practical. Um, I strongly believe that knowledge should be evangelized across every single group, and people like me can only be successful if everyone at the agency partners and works with us and collaborates with us and helps us learn and grow as well. Um, I love one of the quotes from Warren Buffett, where it says, "Innovation without application is hallucination," and to that effect, I think as long as people like me get to work on the ground with businesses every day, looking at the systems at the most granular level, it keeps us grounded, it keeps us real, and it keeps us business oriented versus um, idealistic innovation oriented.
So, in that context, what do you see as the role of innovation labs today? A lot of businesses, as you know, have them. Some agencies have them. Is that something that should be separate or integrated, or where do they fit in the grand scheme of the world?
Um, I think they definitely should be integrated and they should sit within the larger group, because if we think about it, learning and development and the understanding of how new solutions and systems work also needs to come from in-house. There is a lot of development that happens in the outside world where the knowledge does not necessarily um, transcend every level, every person in an equal fashion. And as an example, someone who might be getting exposed to the MIT labs or any other innovation labs happening out in the Bay Area or any other technology company, that knowledge sits within their contracts, their walls. Having an innovation group within the company allows everyone to touch and feel the power of that development. And also, those innovators can put solutions from a business lens standpoint. So something that's not necessarily just 20 years, 30 years out of the line, but how do we make something workable in the next 5 years, 5 months, 6 months, 10 years, 1 year? It keeps them very agile when it comes to the business application of the innovation.
So, does Havas have an innovation lab?
Yes, we do. We, in fact, have global. innovation labs that sit at the market levels.
So these labs, are they generally? I know some of the agencies, their job is to simply, essentially create things without any client necessarily payback, and others are looking at basically productizing anything they create so that their lab is only going to be client funded essentially. What is your view of that?
Um, I think there needs to be that openness and flexibility. At times when um, clients want solutions, it's great to have that capability, and if it's funded, that's great. On the same token, if even if the client is not funding an innovation lab, that knowledge is valuable. I mean, we look at how data and information are becoming the new um, paradigms of an economy. They are becoming actual assets on companies' future business profit and loss statements. So how in today's day and world, groups to just rely on innovations based on client funding, I think would be a limited view. We need to have those capabilities in house, whether or not funded or not funded by client businesses, to ensure that we are keeping relevant with times. We are keeping with what the landscape from a consumer behavior as a society, how it's shaping up. Because when we talk about communications and we talk about creating those connections with the consumer, if we don't have those learning and development labs or innovation units, how are we to make ourselves relevant? How are we to understand what is shaping the society, what is shaping a consumer behavior outside of an emotional piece? And I think that's why it's even more important to keep them within the group and also have them organically integrated across all the teams.
So what are clients and brands asking for these days?
um, I would say clients and brands these days, to some extent, are asking somewhat similar equations. What does it take to deliver my business goals? I think the response to those questions are a lot more complex, are a lot more rich, and a lot more real time, depending on the day, on the technology. So the ultimate question still remains the same: how do we keep a business, how do we keep a brand relevant and closely connected with a consumer and make it meaningful in their lives? And yet the response to them is no longer just based on a media channel or a reach frequency deliver. The response to that question is a connection between the human intelligence, the machine intelligence, the scale, the media requirement, the safety, the privacy, all of it working together to answer that question.
So what do you see short term and long term as the hot technologies these days?
I would say from one of the topics that is very close to something I've been following actively, Chuck, is the idea about the connected and smart homes. I think that is one of the trends from a technology standpoint. It's becoming more and more mainstream. In fact, at CES this year, when we saw the plethora and the richness of how much companies, consumer electronic companies, are investing and leaning in with when it comes to smarter devices, smarter homes, more connection, more insight. I think that's something that is really propelling the next iteration of when we think about marketing and consumer intelligence. There is a whole new lens coming from a smart connected home that can be a powerful lens for brands and marketers alike.
So are you looking for information from the smart home, consumer information?
Information as well as the patterns. So, for example, when we think about the announcements that LG made with their Think home appliances, where every single appliance under that will have the power to utilize artificial intelligence with the deep learning. So, analyzing the weather changes and then adjusting the washing cycle and then expanding natural language voice control to their TVs, all of that from a actual consumer behavior and their usage patterns. That's what I would be keen on to say. How do we put communications and even product development out in the market based on the large behaviors and patterns that are starting to emerge from the physical world? And that's what I'm actively looking for, to say, how do we make that connection with a person more rich, more meaningful, based on not just their media behaviors and consumption, but their actual experience with those products and services.
So in the home, you've got LG now from CES. The consumer with an LG TV can, by voice, interact with their TV. Comcast did the same thing with Xfinity. They've got 15 million people who can now interact through the remote control. Amazon, as you know, can do it. This seems like a lot of segmentation.
Yeah, yeah. I think on the same token, you would, as you mentioned, Chuck, is that even though these technology partners are putting a lot of their own initiative out there, one of the key things that was really impressive when it comes to the LG case and example, they actually embraced an open platform and compatibility as part of their Think platform. And by doing that, now they can integrate with not just their own solutions, but outside solutions. So ultimately, this kind of thinking where people have to understand that it's going to be about integration and interoperability across multiple partners, that's going to be more powerful for a consumer, because ultimately that decision and that autonomy needs to lie with the consumer, and more brands respect that, they are able to create a more long-term connection with the consumer versus trying to restrict them. People don't like to be restricted. They like to be open and empowered. And technologies and businesses that have done that have been truly able to mine that value proposition for their business.
So is LG a client?
No, I'm not from a media standpoint, but yes, we do work with them across various solutions.
So let me ask you a hypothetical. If LG was a client, or a company like LG, and they were coming up with this capability, and Samsung, they're all doing it. They're coming up with a capability of essentially a platform. Would they come to a Havas and say, would you help us with our strategy? And a Havas would say, we think you should go with an open approach versus a closed approach. Is that the sort of thing that you would do?
We definitely would share that point of view. Ultimately, the decision lies at the client side, at the brand team. But from our standpoint, yes, we will, as their partners, we will open up all of the solutions that and our thinking with them to share and say what can and will potentially help us create more meaningful connections with their consumers. And we won't necessarily restrict ourselves to be given that opportunity. We take it upon ourselves as the brands and clients' trusted advisor to showcase them our full suite of thinking and sharing beyond media solutions as part of our thinking for them.
Yeah, I would think for a tech company, those things would be invaluable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the more businesses, so, as I said, we have worked with LG in certain capabilities. And if we were to work with full spectrum of solutions, whether it's business to business or business to consumer side, or even technology solutions, we see that it's more than one partner that it takes to solve the business equation. There are technology companies, there are data companies, there are bigger players. The client in itself sits on so much knowledge from the industry, from the category. We all have to work together and in collaboration to understand and unlock the business value.
So in the connected car of the future, which I'm sure you're tracking, we've got driverless things launching all over the world right now. Ultimately, what do you see as the interaction from a marketing standpoint to the person in the car of the future?
So I would that's that's a very interesting piece. I would say, Chuck, to me, one of the things that I think about is when we think about the business model of vehicles or cars, as you mentioned. Historically, it's all about been having a vehicle that allows a person to travel from this point A to point B, or deliver something from point A to point B. But as we look at the data and technology, that entire business model has gone through so much transformation. And the autonomy or the intelligent cars, as we're talking about, it can open a whole new a spectrum. Like, if we think about it, is it more of an ownership experience, or can potentially it can be a service experience where the value is not just captured by just selling a vehicle, but what if there were subscription models sitting behind the vehicle, where you pay as much as you use, or for that matter, the location that you use it for, or by how many people are using it for. It becomes a content delivery platform, because if you're spending so much time going from point A to point B every day for work or for pleasure, then it's an environment to create a connection. And if you are a brand that can unlock the value, for example, if you're going on a travel and you are with your family, and if you are a restaurant or a family themed experiential place, well, what a beautiful point of connection for you when the person is in transit, because it's in the context of their environment, it's in the context of their mindset. So to me, the value proposition of the connected car is a new business model, a new experience model for that matter, for a consumer of an industry that has revolutionized the society in the past and will continue to do so in the future.
Do you see new forms of advertising going into, say ride sharing, self driving cars?
Definitely. If there is, if, the more people we've seen use these ride sharing and ride hailing apps, and if we think about the technology solutions, even such as Waze, where the crowdsourcing is allowing people to understand and navigate um, traffic and mobility better. The opportunity for that is endless as more and more people connect and they share and learn from each other's experience.
So where do you see that going? I mean, it's the individual car seems like it's a ways off, but ride sharing autonomous vehicles are taking off like crazy.
Yeah, and some of the things I'm seeing, Chuck, is that even from an individual car standpoint or from a ride hailing, if there are people who are going, let's say, on a shopping trip, in a shopping trip together, then based on the data patterns in the mobile devices and the kind of destinations they might have programmed into the vehicle, brands can understand, well, what are the shopping behaviors, what kind of a customer is considering coming to their store in the next 30 minutes, in the next 1 hour, or what kind of consumer can they influence based on, well, what are they planning to buy? If they are planning to buy more clothes, well, could this person be looking for an entire wardrobe change, and could we potentially market them, maybe even shoes or accessories or handbags? Is this person going for a potential job interview, because that data pattern might allow them to see it? So how do we create an entire physical store experience that's reflective of the people who are going to walk into that store in the next 30 minutes to 1 hour, or maybe 5 to 10 minutes? I think that the value from that connected car can be immense from a real-time business application.
So that sounds like you're looking at actually that thought process is linking the value chain more together, so that's the driver in the car as well as the actual retailer.
Yes, and I would say that's one thing that I constantly think about, is how to ensure that the business, the consumer, the delivery vehicle, whether it's a phone or it's a car or it's an actual object, how do we create all those connections together? How does data, technology, everything allow us to create that true, holistic, and definitive consumer and brand journey? And how do we create that exchange on an ongoing basis?
Does security around this stuff bother you at all these days?
Oh, definitely. This is something we take very, very seriously, because all understand that while the proposition from a data and scale and technology is huge and immense, it has to be in the context of the consumer safety and security. So it's not to invade someone's personal space or their personal information. Like I said, as a learner, what we want to understand is the patterns and the behaviors and the insights, and how much of that can allow us to create those experiences as generally and as scalably as possible. So of course there are systems and solutions that continue to be needed and will continue to evolve that ensure more safety parameters and privacy parameters of the consumers. On the same token, as a consumer and as a industry practitioner, I've seen when people see a true value exchange, they trust a brand with their data. And that's the trust is what we want to earn, and create that meaningful connection to say we treat it with utmost respect and um, safeguard. And how do we still allow a brand to create a connection with the consumer that is authentic but grounded in that respect of the consumer privacy and their data privacy.
So, lastly, you believe that people will, consumers actually will finally understand that they will trade something for, they'll trade some private information for value provided?
Yes, and consumers are very intelligent. People in general are very intelligent when it comes to their choices and living their lives, and everybody learns. One of the biggest success stories we've seen from that data standpoint is in the case of Amazon. People share so much information from a credit card, from a purchase standpoint, and they do agree to see the ads that are on Amazon as well and product recommendations, because it's providing value, because that money, that subscription that they're paying is allowing them to live their life in an efficient and smart and um, uh, somewhat of a freedom way, where you don't have to wait around for a package. You can track it. It's there in the next hour or 2 hours or a day or 2 days. And once people get that value, that you are allowing me to live a more richer, more meaningful, and free life, they are willing to share some form of that data to get that value back. And as long as that value exchange remains authentic and true to the consumer interest and need and growth, I think that exchange will continue.
Thank you, Sargi Mann, and thank you all for listening to the Voices of the Internet of Things.
Thank you, Chuck.